So I'd like to welcome everyone in today. We are going to have a very great discussion about supported decision making today. Before we get there, if you would please take your device and point it towards that QR code, that will take you to the training sign-in. That will also get you to the survey, and there will be a certificate that you can also print off when we are done. If you cannot use your device and get to that QR code through that, please use that first link that I have put into our chat box. For those of you that are out on our Facebook Live, I will post it out there in just a second. But please, we are a nonprofit organization, and we do rely heavily upon that information that is housed within that QR code. So if you'd please make sure that you do that today at least before you leave. You will have an opportunity at the end of our webinar to also look at that QR code again. My name is Jill Summerlot. I am the team leader and for the Family Resource Center. I also conduct our webinars here on InSource. But today I have with me my lovely co-host that's been with me for several years now, Ms. Lisa Paddock. And I am going to turn it over to her so she can introduce our special guest today, and we can get started on supported decision making. You take it away, Lisa.
Thank you, Jill, so much. So my name is Lisa Paddock, and I am the assistant to the director at InSource, and thank you for joining us today. So InSource is the Parent Training and Information Center for Indiana, and we help families understand that special education process. We are here to help families understand their child's IEP, the evaluation process, and what their options are. And one of the things that we do is we provide wonderful resources on our website, through our social media, and additionally through our webinars. So today, we are very happy to have with us Carly Sciortino-Poulter. She is the Advocacy Network Director at the ARC of Indiana. And today, Carly, who is our frequent guest, is going to talk about supported decision making. And she's going to talk about how did it come about somewhat. She's going to talk about what it is, what it isn't. And you probably have heard of guardianship, but supported decision making is different from guardianship. And she's going to talk a little bit about the conversations, right, that families have together, that individuals have when they share what a good life looks like for them. So again, you are here at the InSource webinar, and we are going to be talking with Carly from the ARC about supported decision making. Please feel free to put your questions in the chat. I will be watching it and monitoring it and stopping along the way to ask Carly questions. And we are just so appreciative, Carly, of the fact that you've come to talk with us today. And Jill, of course, is live on Facebook. She'll be watching for questions there. And at this point, I will turn it over to you.
Lisa and Jill, thank you so much for having me today. Hi there, everyone. I'm Carly Sciortino-Poulter. I'm the director of the ARC Advocacy Network at the ARC of Indiana. More importantly, I'm a fellow mom. And especially because we're talking about supported decision-making and guardianship and alternatives to guardianship, I want to disclose I have a 25-year-old son with autism, and I have a 19-year-old son who does not have autism. And so, I am in this space where this is relevant in our lives, and we are using it, and we are using it, frankly, with both of our sons. And so, that lived day-to-day experience makes a big difference in understanding how this works in real life. And so, so if you've got questions, go ahead and ask that. Go ahead and ask that too, because I will make references to different stories from our lives and why some of these things are important and how some of these things work and all of that. But, we want to make sure that people know what options are out there. For so long, People, anytime we were talking about people with disabilities, it was automatically assumed that you had to have guardianship. And so often, we get calls every single day from people asking about guardianship, wanting to know more, what they need to do, and all that. And that call almost always starts the same way. My son's turning 18 soon, and the school says I need to get guardianship. Well, maybe. Let's talk about this a little bit and try to figure out what the individual actually needs. Because we tend to think of guardianship as, frankly, not a big deal. It's just the way that mom and dad can keep talking to people and keep doing things for their child. Guardianship is a whole lot more than that, though. When an individual in Indiana is placed under full guardianship, they are stripped of every single right except the right to vote. That's the one thing that can't be taken from them in Indiana. In other states, they do, but not here. And so in reality, an inmate serving a life sentence in prison has more rights than a person under full guardianship in Indiana. That's how serious that is. And people don't think of it like that. They think of it as something benign, something beneficial. And there are times where guardianship is appropriate, don't get me wrong, but we have a wide array of options now. So it's not just guardianship. We have other options like power of attorney, like a healthcare representative, like a psychiatric advance directive, and since 2019, like supported decision making. I said 2019. I can't remember if it's 2019 or 2018. Indiana became the 7th state in the country to formally recognize supported decision making as an alternative to guardianship. Supported decision making is something that you do, but here in Indiana, it can also be a formal legal agreement. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. Is we're going to talk about what supported decision making is. We're going to talk about what supported decision making is not. And then we're going to talk about how do you actually do that in real life. So at this point, let me go ahead and share my screen. And let's get into this. There we go. So the irony is supported decision making is something we all use in our own lives every single day. We just don't think about it like that. But because we're talking about people with disabilities, we have to have a fancy name for it. So we call it supported decision making. But supported decision making is going to people you know, going to people you trust, going to experts to gather information to help you make your decision. So when you call your best friend to ask her advice on something, that's supported decision making. When you call a plumber to figure out, what is wrong with your sink, that's supported decision making. When you check Angie's List. When you check Angie to figure out what plumber you should choose, that's supported decision making. When you read the reviews on Amazon, that is supported decision making because you are going to others to help gather information to help you make your decision. But here in Indiana, supported decision making is something you do just like that. But it can also be a formalized written agreement. And that agreement identifies support team members, but most importantly, it reaffirms the individual's exclusive right to make decisions. By having that formal legal agreement, it also provides certain levels of access to private information as laid out in the agreement. So, for example, it can specify that mom and dad are allowed to talk to doctors, and doctors are allowed to respond to mom and dad. But it reaffirms the individual's exclusive right to make decisions. And more importantly, unlike guardianship, supported decision making retains the individual's civil rights. So, like I said, supported decision making in practice is going to family, going to friends, going to experts for advice or guidance on making a decision. And in doing that, you build a team of supports of the individual's choosing that can be their go-to when they have issues or when problems arise or when they just need day-to-day advice. It specifies how you can gather information and then learn to evaluate all of their options and then review as many options as the person desires, but still the individual maintains the right to make that final decision. This originally began, ooh, it's been less than 20 years now, with a woman named Jenny Hatch in Massachusetts. Jenny was a woman with Down syndrome, and she was independent and living independently, and was making all of her own decisions. And then she got into a bicycle accident, went into the hospital, and wound up being placed under guardianship because she was in the hospital. And suddenly, all of her autonomy, all of her independence, was stripped away from her. And so Jenny was able to get an attorney who helped her fight to overturn that guardianship, and they in turn established the National Supported Decision Making Resource Center. They have a lot of really, really great information if you want to do a deeper dive on this. And they have some really great webinars. And their website is supporteddecisionmaking.org. So you are welcome to look at that. But the interesting thing about supported decision making here in Indiana, especially when we're talking about that legal agreement, is that supported decision making can be used as a support. It can be used as an alternative to guardianship. But here in Indiana, it can also be used in conjunction with guardianship, so that if an individual is under guardianship, that guardianship can reassign certain decision-making powers back to the individual. And sometimes you will see that as a way to work toward terminating that guardianship. So let's talk about those agreements. So when we're talking about that legal agreement, it can cover any topic that the individual chooses. So some of the common topics would be healthcare, would be finances, would be government benefits, living arrangements, and end of life issues. We don't tend to think about that because most of our loved ones are younger, but that's an actual issue. And again, we tend to think about people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. These are absolutely things that can also be used with older adults, or with anyone really. So, those end of life issues are also something to consider when doing this. And so those agreements, first of all, they identify the person's preferred method of support. Is it that they want somebody to help them research? Is it that they want somebody to discuss things with them? Is it that they want that person to be a sounding board? How does that individual want support? What does that look like for them? And then it structures the decision-making supports to help the individual make decisions, and it clarifies how the decision-making relationship will work. But again, it confirms the individual's rights and their ability to make their own decisions, even when accommodations are necessary. So why in the world do I keep stressing it like that? Because let's be honest, it sounds a little weird that I keep doing that. It's because we see at times, especially with hospitals, especially with the medical community, where when it comes to individuals with disabilities, I'm trying to be very, very polite and diplomatic here. They don't necessarily recognize that the person has the ability to make their own decisions. And there are a lot of reasons for that, but that is really one of the biggest reasons why supported decision making became such an issue, was to reaffirm that that individual has the right to make their own decisions and should not have to be placed under guardianship because they're in the hospital. Or one of the things we see a lot is somebody is denied dental care because the dentist and liability insurer will not cover them unless the individual is under guardianship. You should not have to be under guardianship just because you need a cavity filled or you need a root canal or whatever the case may be. That should not be a reason to be placed under guardianship. And so That's one of the things that supported decision making does, is it reaffirms that the individual has the right to make their own decisions. And supported decision making agreements can be revoked or they can be restructured at any time. So why is this important? Well, first of all, when you have the ability to make your own decisions, when you have that autonomy, number one, it reaffirms independence. It also reinforces respect. It reinforces equality. One of the things we see, especially, is, an adult with a disability will go to the doctor. And instead of the doctor talking to their patient, they talk to the person who brought them, whether that's a family member, whether it's a direct support professional, whomever. And so the doctor will only talk to the person who brought them. Well, if that happens to you, make a really big deal about saying, "Gee, I don't know. Jenny, does your stomach hurt?" Why are they asking you if the person's stomach hurts? Ask the person. It reaffirms that equality. It reaffirms that that person deserves respect, and it redirects the individuals who are talking to them that they need to be talking to the person with a disability. It also is important for self-determination. What we see is that when individuals have more self-determination, when they get to direct their own lives, we see that they are happier. We see that they are healthier. We see that they actually live longer because they have that self-determination. So we not only see quantity of life increase, we see a much better quality of life when individuals are able to make their own decisions. So as we're talking about what supported decision making is, it's also important to talk about what supported decision making is not. Supported decision making is not substituted decision making. Again, individuals retain the ability to make their own decisions. No one else can make decisions for them or on their behalf if we're only using supported decision making. Supported decision making is also not coerced decision making. And so one of the things we see is that sometimes, we have supporters who are trying to convince them to make the decision that they want. Individuals can make decisions the team doesn't agree with, including bad decisions. And those decisions need to be respected and honored. And I know that can be really, really difficult. I mean, that kind of flies in the face of everything, you think, because especially because I think I'm talking to a lot of parents here, we want to protect our kids and everything. And we don't want them to make bad decisions. But that's an important thing too. And we're going to get into that here in just a moment. But before we do that, let's talk about when to start. Because a lot of times people don't even start thinking about any of this until their child is 17 or about to turn 18. I've literally had calls from people where their child was turning 18 in a week, and this is the first time they're having those decisions. When do you start using supported decision making? As early as possible. And yes, I really do mean using supported decision making with a 4-year-old. I know that may sound a little bit strange, but supported decision making is not an all or nothing prospect either. Supported decision making is a tool you can use to help teach decision making skills. So we can absolutely use that with younger individuals. And we start that by offering choice. You know, do you want a peanut butter sandwich or do you want a ham sandwich for lunch? Do you want to wear a sweatshirt or do you want to wear a polo today? You know, Starting off by offering choice, making those simple choices and kind of containing those. And then as their decision-making skills grow, move to more open-ended choices. Instead of, do you want a peanut butter sandwich or a ham sandwich? What do you want for lunch today? What kind of classes do you want to take? What jobs do you want to explore? And start teaching those decision-making skills. What do we want to accomplish? What information do we need to know? And who can we talk to for information? So the first time we ever very decidedly used supported decision making with my older son. He was a freshman in high school, and he came home with a flyer for something called Elite Gaming Live. Do not Google that. Okay, just warning you now. And this paper was talking about how computer programmers were making 80, 90, and $100,000 a year. And then they started talking about how parents pay thousands of dollars every year in travel sports fees. And of course, my first thought was, holy cow, how much does this thing cost? But my son had never, ever asked to do anything before in his life. So if there was a way to pull this off, we were going to. But I started asking him questions. I said, first question, Andy, how much does this cost? It doesn't cost anything. I'm like, well, where did you get that? And he goes, well, it doesn't say anything. Does that sound familiar to some of you? Then I was asking him how often do they meet? How often are we going to have to do this? Because where I live, travel sports is a whole thing. And there are people who do travel sports 6 and 7 days a week. And that is not something I was really all that interested in. And he didn't know that answer. And he was getting more and more frustrated and upset that I wasn't just saying yes. And again, he'd never asked to do anything before in his life. So if we could do this, we were going to. But what finally made him stop, he did a program through his waiver that he used to call his guys' night out. And finally I said, Andy, what happens if it meets at the same time as your guys' night out? And that's what made him stop. And he goes, oh, I don't know. I said, okay, there was my opening. I said, okay, there's some more information we need, right? And he goes, yeah. I said, okay. And we sat down and we made a list of questions together. That's how I was teaching him, okay, here's the type of information we need to gather. And I'll be perfectly honest, I was using the 5 W's and how to help me guide that questions that we were developing. But we made those questions together. So I was teaching him, what type of information do we need to gather? Then I asked him, who can we ask these questions to? And he thought for a minute. He said, his resource teacher. I'm like, that's a really good idea. Who else can we ask? And he thought, and he goes, the teacher in charge. I'm like, that's a great idea, Andy. So his job the next day was to go to school and ask these 2 teachers the 6 questions that we came up with. Now, the reality is, I'm not dumb. I emailed both of the teachers asking them the questions too. And so I got the answers. But Andy came home and he had answers to some of the questions. Okay. And for a very first effort, I was thrilled. It was a great job. Turns out Elite Gaming Live is a school-wide video game competition where they would meet 3 times a year and they'd stay till 6 p.m. So they had to get parental consent to do that. And he was right. It really was free, which was not something I was expecting. So yes, of course he could do that. We were thrilled to let him do that. But that was the first time we very deliberately used supported decision-making. And we still use that today. When he gets a letter from Social Security, the first thing I do is I ask, can I open this letter? Yes, that feels weird, but it's about conveying respect. And by me showing that respect to him, he knows that he should expect that same level of respect from other people. And so then I read the letter, I explain what the letter is saying to him because that's something that, he needs some help with. And let's be honest, most of us cannot decipher bureaucracy, which is its own language. So I translate the letter from bureaucracy into human for him. But I explain what the letter says. And then we talk about it and figure out what to do next. And so you want to do all of that in an age appropriate way, and include them in discussions. So, for example, when you have that case conference, it doesn't matter if they are high school, if they are middle school, if they are grade school. Talk with them about what an IEP is, what a case conference is, that they have the right to say what they want to happen and get their input on that. Also, teach them to always come together to evaluate information and make that decision. But always ask, What do you think? That's one of the keys here, is asking, what do you think? Because that's what helps teach them that their opinion matters, that their opinion is valued, and that they have the right to express what they think. But also talk about what the consequences are for their decisions. So for example, if your child has been saving up money because they want to buy a PS5, great. That's a great goal to have. It's a good thing. You're teaching that money management, you're teaching them how to save. All of that is wonderful. But if they come home and they suddenly say, hey, I saw this really cool action figure at the store and I really want to buy that. Okay, let's talk about that. What would be the consequences of it? If you buy that action figure, you can do that. It's going to take longer than to buy your PS5. Is that what you want to do? Let them make that decision and honor that decision, even when we don't agree with it. And so part of this is also building a network of support. And that is essential, not only for decision making, but for life. And that network of support is what is going to help your child and help protect your child in this world. So first of all, identify people they can go to. It could be different people for different topics. Both of my sisters are nurses. If you try to talk to me about something medical, my eyes will glaze over. I am not the person that you talk to for that. I'm the person you come to when you need a loophole. I'm the one you talk to when you need to decipher Medicaid. Okay. You find the right person for the right topic. And some of those can be personal relationships. Some of those can be business relationships. So, maybe that's making sure that you are developing a relationship with the pharmacist so that when you have questions about your medication or when you're not feeling well and you need some advice about, what you can take to settle your stomach, if you've already developed a relationship with that pharmacist, and that can just be a simple matter of going into the pharmacy, always saying hi, introducing yourselves, and developing that kind of a relationship. When you meet them, they know you. And so when you say, hey, I need some help with something, oh yeah, you're not some anonymous person. You're the guy I know. You betcha. What can I help with? Same with like the bankers. How many of you actually go into a bank anymore? We all use the ATM. But if you actually go into the bank branch and you start seeing the tellers on a regular basis and you develop a relationship with those tellers, then if something goes wrong with the bank account, if there's some confusion, maybe the books aren't balancing or something is messed up, guess what? They're going to sit down with you and they're going to walk you through all of that and try to help figure out what's going on. Now, don't get me wrong. Would they do that for anybody? Yes, but once you've developed that relationship, even when it's just a friendship and hey, how you doing? Even when you don't really know each other's names, guess what? You've bred that familiarity already. And so they have that buy-in to want to help because you're not just some anonymous person. You're the person they say hi to every week. And so you also want to contact those individuals, develop those relationships, and then ask them, hey, whenever Andy has a question, can he come to you and ask you about all those things? Once you develop that relationship, they're going to say yes. Ask them if they're willing to be an information resource. Have regular contact and discussions and develop that familiarity. And you may need to update contacts periodically. You may move, they may move. You may find somebody that you have a better connection with who can answer your questions. And you always want to look for new people so that you're growing that circle of support. Because more people in your loved one's life is a good thing. And the Life Course Framework actually has some really great tools available to help determine how much support and in what areas a person may need support when it comes to decision making. This is one of their tools, which is about decision making, and they break things down into the different life domains and ask some specific questions. And then I can decide with no extra support. I need support with my decision, or I need somebody to make the decision for me. And we can make those, we can break it down like that. And we also need to recognize that those things are going to change over time. And part of that is about the familiarity. Part of that is about learning the skills to make decisions, learning what the consequences and everything are. And so while someone may need somebody to make the decision for them at 14, they may no longer need somebody to make that decision for them when they're 18, because we continue to work on those decision-making skills. But this is a tool from LifeCourse. You can find this at lifecoursetools.com, and it is free. They've got a lot of really, really great tools available. They are all free. And so this one is actually from the Arc of the United States. This was, I'll be perfectly honest, this was actually developed in the 1990s. And I know that it's a little bit strange that I still, refer to this and still give this out. But what I like about it is because it is so nuanced. You know, so here as an example, I care for my own clothes. I do not, even if I had the chance. I do sometimes when I have the chance. I do most of the time when I have the chance. I do all of the time when I have the chance. So part of it is this is a lot more nuanced to me, and help. I think it helps give a little bit better information to figure out how much support and where somebody may need support in all of this. Here's some other here's some of the other questions. I tell others when I have new or different ideas or opinions, or I usually agree with others' opinions and ideas. Really kind of drills down on all of that. But to get back to Life Course, they've got a lot of supported decision making tools. So this is a life trajectory specifically on supported decision making. And so here is, what is our vision for a good life, and what decisions and choices do I want to make for myself, or with help from my family, and what is my vision of a good life? What do I not want? What decisions and choices do I not want someone else making for me without my input or approval? What are the past experiences I have with decision making? What are the things I still need to develop moving forward? So something like this, you know, it looks a little bit complicated, but it's something where it actually does break things down into manageable pieces. And then here is what they call an integrated support star, where you can document what types of resources you already have available to you when it comes to decision making, and also you can document what types of supports do you still need to develop for decision making. But there are also some barriers to supported decision making, and one of the barriers we have is that as a society, we have a desire to protect. We view it as our obligation to protect individuals who may need additional help in life, whether that's children, whether that's older adults, or whether that's people with disabilities. Our desire to protect isn't a bad thing, but sometimes what we don't realize is that in doing that, with our desire to protect, we're actually causing some harm here, because we tend to focus on providing the supports that we think are necessary, but we don't often consult with or listen to the people that we're trying to assist. It's not that we're intentionally doing it, it's that in most situations, we're not thinking about it in those terms, because it's done out of love. It's not done out of malice. It's done out of love. We want to keep people safe. We want to protect them from physical harm. We're afraid they'll cut themselves, so we don't teach them how to use a knife. We just cut things for them. We're afraid of emotional harm. We're afraid they're going to get made fun of, so that we don't go to the school parties or join the community sports leagues. We're afraid of financial harm. We're afraid they're going to get taken advantage of, or they're going to squander all of their money. So we become their rep payee and we control all of their money. It's not that we're trying to do anything bad. We do things for them rather than teaching them to do it. And because we are trying to protect them, we're doing it because we love them. But what we don't realize is that oftentimes we are inadvertently creating dependence and isolation. It's not our intent, but it's often the effect. Because when we do something for people, we take something away from people. So when we're worried about physical harm, instead of doing it for them, teach them how to do things so that they don't get hurt. That's how we keep them safe. When it comes to emotional harm, When the person is always included and they're always around, first of all, they learn how to interact with other people, and other people discover that people with disabilities are just people. People with disabilities like ice cream too. People with disabilities like playing basketball. Well, not all of them, but some of them do. And we teach the outside world that people with disabilities are just people. When it comes to financial harm, we use that supported decision making process. We make that part of the routine so that we're teaching them how to manage money. We're teaching them how to evaluate what people are telling them. And if we make that part of the routine and we just make that something we always do, that's something that they're always going to do, and they're always going to come back, and we're going to talk about it together. And oftentimes we will intervene because we're trying to make things easier. And I am just as guilty of that as anybody else, you know, but instead of making calls for them, coach them on how to make the calls, sit with them as they make the calls, and discuss what was said. If they're not at a point right now where they can make the call themselves, have them sit with you so that they can listen in and learn those things so that eventually they can be the one who's calling the Medicaid office, or they can be the one who's calling the store to find out if they have a product in stock, or whatever the case may be. Do those things together so that they learn how to do them on their own. Because there is dignity in risk. I talk to parents all the time about this, and oftentimes they will say the same thing. We'll be talking about options and alternatives to guardianship, and they'll say, you know, he doesn't make the best choices. There is not a parent of an 18-year-old on the planet Earth who does not feel the same way. Forget about disability. Every parent of an 18-year-old feels the exact same way. Our parents felt that way about us. And guess what? They were right. We made some lousy choices when we were 18, but we learn from bad choices. When I was a freshman in college, I may or may not have accidentally signed up for 5 years of magazines because a telemarketer called at 8:30 on a Saturday morning, which should be illegal. I signed up for 5 years of magazines that I never cared about. I remember, looking back what it was, and I'm so going to date myself by saying this. One of the magazines was TV Guide. And I thought, oh, that would be smart because I'm in a different city, and that way I know what's on TV. I got 5 years of magazines, and I still remember I had to pay $15 a month for 2.5 years for those magazines. And at the time, $15 a month was actually a substantial part of my monthly budget. Did I make a bad choice? Oh, I absolutely made a bad choice. Did I learn from the choice? I absolutely did. I made sure my purse was stuck in my closet so that if another telemarketer ever called, I had to get out of bed to go get it, where I would wake up and realize I do not need that. We learn from our bad choices. So we need to let people try, and we need to let them try again and try again and try again. We need to be there to help them make their decisions. We need to help them understand the consequences of their decisions. And here's the key. We need to teach them about the next steps, because that is often something that we overlook, is teaching the next steps. And we need to teach them to use that supported decision-making model to come to you and to come to their support team first, just as a matter of routine, so that it's a regular part of that decision-making process. And so they're used to it, so they will always do that, but ultimately having them make the final decision. Because part of that dignity of risk is the right to fail. And I know that that is scary, but the reality is fail is not the 4-letter F word we need to worry about, because the reality is we all mess up. Sometimes it's big, sometimes it's small, but we all mess up, but the thing is we get second chances. People with disabilities often aren't given that same opportunity to have that second chance. If they don't do it perfectly the first time, they often don't get another opportunity to try. I don't know about you. I don't always do something perfectly the very first time, but nobody denies me a second chance. But when a person with a disability doesn't do it perfectly the first time, they are constantly reminded they couldn't do it. Well, we tried to let you cook and you burned what you were making. I used to be a culinary instructor. I was a culinary instructor for almost a decade. I was literally paid for my cooking ability. I still occasionally burn things. Does somebody take away my ability to cook? No. I'm given the second chance. Oftentimes people with disabilities are denied that opportunity. And by constantly being reminded, well, you tried to do that and you couldn't do it. It's dehumanizing and it's humiliating. And it's not necessarily something anybody is thinking about, but it's still the effect. And mistakes happen. So we need to normalize mistakes. Mistakes aren't a bad thing. Mistakes help us know how to do it better the next time. We learn from our bad choices. So we need to make sure that we let people try and try again and try again and try again. But one of the keys is we need to talk through the next steps. And like I said, that's one of the things that we often overlook. So when somebody makes a mistake, let's talk about, first of all, is there a way to fix it? How do we address the immediate problems? What can we do differently next time? And teach them to go to their support team as a matter of routine and just as a regular part of that decision-making process. I told you earlier, I've got two kids. One is my son with autism. My other son is not, and he is a freshman in college this year. And I hope he does not mind me telling this story. I don't think he will. Um, so, very first finals week, he had it on his calendar for over a month that one of his finals was December 17th at 6:10 p.m. So he was prepping and he was studying for that final. Turns out it was December 16th at 7:10 p.m. He called us at about 11:30 that night when he realized he missed his final. He was rightfully distraught. I think that's almost anybody's, ultimate fear is missing one of your finals in college. He didn't know what to do, and think about it. Most kids his age wouldn't know what to do. So we talked through, okay, well, first of all, I was talking him down because he was very, very anxious about all of that. Wouldn't you be? But we talked about those next steps. Is there a way to fix this? Okay, first thing tomorrow morning, at 8 o'clock, be at the math department's offices to talk to them about it. He had already emailed his professors to let his professor know about this and to see if there was any way to fix it. Sure enough, he was at the office at 8 o'clock the next morning. Office didn't open till 9 o'clock, but as far as I'm concerned, that just shows how important this was to him, and, he was prepared to talk to them about all of this, throw himself on their mercy and all that. You know what they did? They cut him off as soon as he started explaining, and they handed him a card and said, "Here, call this number. They'll take care of it." He got to take his final at 2 o'clock that afternoon. We talked through those next steps, and that's one of those things that is often overlooked. He got the opportunity to try again. That was supported decision making. He went to people he knew. He went to mom and dad, people he trusted, to get advice on what to do. And he did those things. And so part of it is talking through those next steps. Is there a way to fix the mistake? How do we address any immediate problems? Is it that you accidentally forgot to pay your electric bill? Okay, let's be honest, that's not a good thing. That has happened to most of us at some point where it was just an accident. Well, can we still pay it now? Oh, yeah, we can. So let's make sure we have that. Overdrew the checking account. I know my examples are very dated. Sorry about that, guys. That is how I live my life, I literally still have a checkbook. I still literally keep a check register because that helps me stay organized. And that's what works for me. What works for your loved one, and figuring out those tools and teaching them those tools so that they can avoid those mistakes when they come up. there are also some ethical considerations when it comes to failure. Like I said, fail is not the four-letter F word we need to worry about, but there comes times where we've got to decide, is this okay? Is it beneficial? Is it a beneficial failure, or is it a harmful failure? What in the world does that mean? Well, let's take my example of when I accidentally signed up for 5 years of Spin magazine. I would say it was a beneficial failure. I failed because I signed up for something I did not want or need or mean to, and it was a sizable part of my budget at the time. But I learned from that. So that is a beneficial failure. Is this a temporary or is this permanent harm? For me, I was going to have to pay that for 2.5 years. Even though that's a long time, it was still temporary. Then is it inconvenient or is it actually dangerous? Deciding, hey, I'm not going to take my heart medicine anymore. That is a dangerous failure. That is a failure we don't let stand, because that can kill someone. We don't let that stand. But is it just inconvenient? That is a failure that you may need to accept. And then it's about bridging that gap and providing the supports while they're learning to achieve success, because this is not an instant thing. This is not an all or nothing thing. This is an ongoing process. And even when they have learned a lot of these skills, they're still going to come back to you at different times because something new has happened, and they need to talk those things through. And that's exactly what we want to instill with supported decision making. And it's important to know you are not alone. It's important to build that network of support and come together to discuss choices. It's about talking together. It's about providing support. It's about normalizing mistakes and about talking about those next steps. So with all of that being said, I want to open it up to questions, because I know that this is, especially because, I'm mostly talking to parents of transition age kids, although hopefully we've got some young parents on here too. And on the one hand, this kind of flies in the face of everything you've ever been taught. You're taught to protect your child. Of course we protect our child. We are taught to, intervene, and all that. And now suddenly we're saying all the opposite things. But as hard as this is, that is normal parenting. That is what every parent faces. And it is hard for all of us, whether our kids have disabilities or not. Every parent is going through this. And recognizing that they get to make their own decisions, recognizing you have to accept those decisions, is hard, but that is also success, because it's shown that you have succeeded as a parent because they are able to do these things. Now, I know that with some of our kids, some of that may not always be an option. We may always have to have, some intervention or some additional supports or something like that. But we celebrate the decisions that they are able to make. And we absolutely keep working toward that always. It's, a lot of times I think people think that, there's a magic switch at 18. And in some ways there are, but in other ways there aren't. In school, when you develop goals, it's for 1 year at a time as part of your IEP. When you're not talking the school system, who cares if it takes, 6 months, 1 year, or 10 years? We keep working on all that, and that's all okay. We don't have those artificial time constraints. But ask your questions. Let me know what you're thinking.
Carly, thank you so much. We have a question in the queue that I'm going to ask, but I want to say, I think you did a very nice job of portraying every parent's heart. And even for some of our family members that aren't our children, but our family members or close friends that might have some health issues or some developmental delays. Yeah. And we need to be able to walk that journey and allow autonomy. And you're right. Every 18-year, I've never met an 18-year-old ever that did not think they knew everything. And I am included. At 18, I was assured I did. Now, I know that is not true at
Well,
my age.
well, and it's also accepting decisions you may not
Yes,
necessarily agree with. For
yes,
example, this past weekend, IU won the National Football Championship.
yes.
My son may have been on Kirkwood until about 4 a.m. Is that a decision I would make? No, you could not have paid me to do that. But
Yes.
did he do it? Yes, he did. Did he learn something from that? Yes. Did he get value from that? Yes. Is it a decision I would have made? Heck no.
Absolutely. And just the fact that you even divided it into, is this temporary or permanent? Is it inconvenient or is it really dangerous? Right. And again, as Angie said here in our chat, that dignity of risk, that ability to make mistakes, because as you said, we all will. All of us have forgotten something. We've overlooked something. We've had it on the calendar wrong. We forgot the auto pay. We went off without what we were supposed to bring to the event, all of these things. And you are correct. We are afforded much more grace. Oh, you just forgot that, or you overlooked it. And we need to have those same conversations and thoughts to allow our individuals in our lives that might have some special healthcare needs or intellectual disability, and then knowing where there needs to be a certain level of support. So we do have a question here um, from Angie, and I will just read that. So in Indiana, if you choose supported decision making versus guardianship or another option, do you need to go through a lawyer to file documents for that? And I'm going to break it into a couple parts.
Okay.
And do you need to keep filing it for it to stay in place forever? And then I've got a couple of other questions.
No, you do not have to keep filing it. You can go to an attorney and have them draw up a supported decision-making agreement specific to you and your loved one. Indiana Disability Rights also has supported decision-making documents. So before supported decision-making was put into law here in Indiana, there was a pilot project to develop supported decision making. It was initially the Wings project, and it involved a young woman named Jamie Beck, who was placed under guardianship and wanted to work off of guardianship. And so Indiana had a grant, I believe, from the Administration on Community Living to develop supported decision making and what that would look like, and develop all of these tools to help somebody get off of guardianship. And in fact, Jamie Beck was the very first person with an intellectual or developmental disability in the history of the state of Indiana to have her guardianship terminated. That was 2018. That wasn't even 10 years ago. That's how recent this has been. So, but the tools that they developed as part of that pilot project are available on Indiana Disability Rights website. They've got a lot of really great resources there. You are welcome to reach out to us at the Arc of Indiana. We can send you all of that information as well, because we have copies of all of that, and so you can use that instead.
Okay, then the next parts of the questions are,
Sure.
what are the cons? Can my young adult get themselves into, say, a contract that the parent would not be aware of,
Yep.
that has consequences that are legally bound, for instance? That's one consequence compared
Yep.
to guardianship. So if you could speak to that.
So yes, they can absolutely do that because they are an emancipated adult, just like any other emancipated adult. And your 18-year-old who does not have a disability would be able to do the exact same thing. So could they enter a contract? Yeah, they can, because they have that decision-making right.
Okay, and that is true, as all 18-year-olds typically do.
Yeah.
Another question is, my son is 21 now, and this parent is regularly doing things for him, right? Making phone calls to the doctor, perhaps doing things that this parent, like all of us, feel like, oh, wait a minute, maybe I shouldn't be doing all that. And she is asking, how do I train myself to let go? And for clarity, this young man does have autism and some disabilities. So maybe you could speak to, we as parents have a tendency to go ahead and just keep doing those when we've been doing those things when they're 7, 8, 9. And what do we do?
Let's be honest. We're on autopilot doing it. We're not even thinking about it. And it's not that we are intentionally not letting them do it.
Right.
It's that we're not just thinking about it, we're just doing it ourselves. Think about when our kids were little and they were learning to tie their shoes, how excruciating that was, because it would be so much easier for me to just tie their shoe for them because we got to go. But in doing that, they never learn how to tie their shoes. And it takes forever for them to do it. We got to channel that back again and get back into that mode. And you're right. And like I said, I have been there. And I have done all of that as well with my son. So part of it is, you have to stop yourself and you have to consciously remember, no, wait, I have to teach him how to do this. And so part of it, especially as you are doing this from the very beginning, is saying, hey, why don't you do this with me? And so you can learn how to do this on your own, because the reality is most of our kids want to be independent. They want to be able to do things, but they don't think they're allowed to say that, and a lot of our kids, especially on the spectrum, have a lot of difficulty with initiation, with starting something. So they're not going to necessarily say that on their own, but it's important that we bring them alongside so that they can hear at first, hear how that's done. And then once you've had that conversation on the phone, whether that's, hey, this is how you call the doctor. And so they can hear that. So you're modeling it for them essentially. And then slowly transition over of, hey, why don't you do this? I'll be with you. Why don't you do this? And here's what you say, because again, we got to break down those steps for them. But we start that way in teaching them how to do this. And especially when we have some of those, more complicated issues, let's say, for example, that there is a problem at the pharmacy because the prescription was supposed to have a prior authorization and there's a problem with the insurance not getting the prior authorization in there. We let them hear all that, but then afterwards talk about it and break it down and explain what's really going on. And then, as you've done that for a little while, then make sure you're asking them, what do you think? How do you think that went? Do you understand what was going on there? And constantly go back to the, what do you think? Because that's then reinforcing it's okay for me to have an opinion. I should have an opinion. My opinion has value. And that's how you start. This is not something that is going to be necessarily be fast. It's okay for this to take a while as they learn these skills. And we've got to make sure that we're giving them the amount of time they need to learn skills.
Absolutely. And one thing you might try is, as you're modeling, especially for individuals who might need something concrete, is to write down the steps, I think. Write it
absolutely.
down. Here are some of the things you make sure when you go to the doctor's visit that you talk about your medicine, right? You talk about how it makes you feel. You talk about the difficulty you're having affording it, whatever it is, and any new health problems. And then you can just keep that. You can even put it in pictures and put it in your phone or something.
And think about it. A lot of us need those types. We do those things for ourselves because we get to the doctor's office and suddenly everything falls out of our brain and we can't remember what we needed to talk about. So we make those lists. We teach them, those supports. Sometimes supports are people and sometimes supports are things.
That is right.
So
it's funny that you mentioned that. I just have to tell you that one of the things that as a parent I never thought about was driving and the process of if you get pulled over from a policeman, what do you do? If you're in a wreck, what do you do? So we ended up making a bullet points and putting it in the glove box because we needed to make sure that he had all of that information. But
One of the things I'm going to recommend as an adjustment now. So certain communities in Indiana have something called the Blue Envelope.
They
Or the
do.
Blue Envelope Project. We have it in Marion County. I know they've got it up in Porter County. I know that Hancock County is starting to have some of those discussions. There are about 7 communities that I know of in Indiana. I just can't remember them all who have this, and it's literally a blue envelope that you attach to your visor in your car. And what that blue envelope signifies to the police is, oh, someone in this car likely has a disability. What that tells police is if they're not acting in a typical way, or if they're not answering questions in a typical way, that may not be a sign that they're doing something wrong. That might be a sign of, oh, this person has a disability. Because one of the things I'm concerned about is when they go to grab something out of the glove box, that can be a red flag to police. Whereas if they've got it in that blue envelope on their visor, the police can see them and have an idea of what that is, where they can pull that down.
Great point.
And that's one of those things. Things adjust over time. That was a great way to do that. And man, I'm stealing that from you, Jill. That is a great thing to do. But as things evolve, the way we do things may need to adjust. And so that's one of the things we also have to keep doing, is making sure that we're updating all of this with our kids.
Another quick point before I read the next one has to do with the fact that we now have the technology to FaceTime. So you go to the doctor, or you go to the appointment, you can bring someone along with you, and they don't even have to be in the same state.
Right.
Then they can hear things, they can add things, and it's another set of ears.
Yep.
So those are some other things. Oh, okay. So you talked a little bit about the paperwork.
Well, I also just want to throw in here, we're talking about this in terms of young adults with disabilities. Okay. For many of us, we are also at an age where we are part of that sandwich generation, where we are not only caring for our children, we're also helping with our aging parents. So these are things we may need to be doing with our aging parents as well.
Absolutely. And honestly, some of these are tools that I use, kind of right in that middle. If I don't set alarms, if I don't make notes, a variety of times.
And that's just it, is we can automate a lot of things. We don't, if somebody's not able to manage their own finances, or has trouble managing their own finances, maybe it's that they have trouble paying their bills on time. How many of us use auto pay already? Why wouldn't we use that? While it makes our lives easier, that can be the difference between success and failure for a person with a disability. So let's also make sure that we're using those things that are available to everyone, that make a difference in everybody's life, but that can be the difference between success and failure. I'm sorry, I see that we keep getting more questions. I need to stop.
That is okay, because all of those conveniences can help all of us.
Yes,
that is right. So we've already talked about a document. There was a question about having it notarized. It does not need to be notarized.
It doesn't have to be.
Okay.
It does not.
It can be. You can go to an attorney. It could be notarized, but does not have to be.
Correct.
There's information on IDR's website, and you can also get it. And so is there a formal process to initiate supported decision-making, or is it more informal?
I don't think it's actually both, because like I said, from an informal standpoint, we all use supported decision-making all the time. I will absolutely call Lisa up and say, okay, Lisa, help me understand this. And she does,
A sounding board.
Yes. When my water heater broke a few years ago, first thing I did was I picked up the phone. I called my sister. I didn't know my water heater was broke. I knew my water heater was leaking. I said, Ann, what do I do? She's like, oh, honey, you're toast. You have to replace it. Crap. Okay, who do I call to do that? And so she gave me a couple options, and we talked about all that. That's informal supported decision making. It's just the things we do on a daily basis. The formal supported decision making is really that legal agreement, and it's really about reinforcing to outsiders, whether that's the school system, whether that's doctors, whether that's the bank, whomever, reinforcing that that individual has the right to make their own decisions. So, and then as far as, how do you initiate that formal process? It's about filling out the paperwork and knowing that you can always go back and revise it too.
That's excellent. So another question is a little bit wider
Okay.
uh, as far as that, and it talks about there's some disagreements different times on motivation and how to get someone to move forward. That sometimes the lack of being involved socially can cause some individuals to go backwards rather than forwards.
Uh-huh.
And we as families, we all want to support the individual, but we're worried if that individual might just be engaging in some kind of activity that might not be productive all day long. And how can you reconcile some of those issues? Because bills have to be paid in some way by someone.
Sure.
There people might have a different idea also of what is happiness, how much engagement with friends they want, what they want to do during the day. So how I'm guessing that the thought is,
Yeah.
how do we walk through some of those different perceptions and still know there is a balance of things that have to be taken care of? I hope
That
I
is
answered
that is absolutely something that I have faced in my own life.
Mhm.
So, my son is he's not exactly a people person. Like it takes him a good year to warm up to someone before he really, is comfortable talking to them. And, and he doesn't, he has a lot of difficulty initiating things on his own. I swear his favorite phrase is, I don't know. But that's just my frustration talking. Um, and and so I have had to face this myself because, like, you know, when they're in high school still, they're seeing a lot of people, they're doing a lot of things. And then once high school is done, for so many, all those things dry up. And we try to make sure that they're involved. We try to get them to do things. And one of the hardest things for me, so like I mentioned earlier that one of the programs my son used to be in, he called his guys' night out. He loved that program. The agency who did that program stopped. There are other agencies who do it though. And so I have talked to him about, hey, let's try with this other group to do this. You loved it so much, let's see if that can be an option. And he's not willing to take the next step yet. And that is one of those really, really hard things for me because I just want to go in and okay, if you're not going to do it, I'm going to do this for you. But one of the hardest things to wrap my head around is even though I want it for him, and even though he enjoyed it, he does not want that for himself, at least right now. And man, is that hard. I mean, seriously, man, is that hard because we want them to be out and active and all that. And one of the things we have to recognize and 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 accept, regardless of how hard it is that even though that's what we want for them, that may not be what they want for themselves. And I know that that is hard. And one of the other things that we also have to think about, and this is again something that's hard for me to wrap my head around, because I talk to a lot of families and they're really frustrated because their kids are just playing video games all day. One of the things I learned from my sons during COVID was because they were playing video games all the time. That was actually how they were socializing with their friends. And so here we've got a huge generational difference where for us, socializing meant getting together, going to the mall or meeting at McDonald's or, driving up and down the strip or whatever the case may be. That is not how this generation socializes. This generation socializes through devices. And in fact, if they were all sitting in a room together, they're not talking to one another, they're using a device. And I know that for us, that's a really, really difficult thing to wrap our head around, let alone accept. but for them, that is how they socialize. And so we've also, you know, at what point do we accept that maybe playing video games is, if they are actually talking to some of their friends, if they're actually socializing, that is interaction and that is their preferred interaction. And that may be by doing it through, through a device that may provide um the barrier or the boundary that allows them to actually engage more rather than if they were face to face. Because I know a lot of our kids have difficulty with face to face interactions. That by doing it through a device, it may actually free them up to have more social interactions. And boy, is that a hard thing to reconcile.
And I think one of the other things that you can consider, because I don't know this person's whole situation, is sitting down together, or maybe if there's a provider, or and talk about what you feel the family rules
Right.
are. So maybe there are some things, okay,
Mm.
here are
Right.
the things we've all got to contribute to the family before we all sit down and watch TV
Right.
or do
Well, and
video games, and
you know,
some
and
balance there in somewhere that's going to help toward perhaps possible employment
right.
or some of the other adult type skills.
And
That's
sometimes we need to make sure that we're providing some flexibility. Do they have to, gather the trash at 7 o'clock on Sunday night? Or can it be, hey, as long as it's done by 8 o'clock, make sure it's
right.
done so that you can get it out, and giving that flexibility, whether it's flexibility in time, whether it's flexibility in method. So let's say, for example, we're talking about paying bills, and part of that is when you are teaching them those things, sitting down and showing them how to do this and doing these things together. And if they give permission, having access, having their username and password so that you can go in and check to make sure that it's okay, linking their bank account to your bank account so that you can help monitor that. But, okay, we're going to have it on the calendar on this day. We're going to set that reminder. Okay, if we can't do it at noon, okay, let's set a timer where we come back in an hour so that we do that. But we set up that expectation that, okay, I understand you want some flexibility, but it has to be done today. So we'll give that flexibility, but eventually we do actually have to come back and do it.
And I think that leans toward helping to teach the skills that maybe none of us
Right.
Well,
Well,
are always the best at, right? Or no
right.
one maybe likes to have to do,
Yeah.
but there
And
are
and
some necessary things.
and explaining that,
Mhm.
recognizing that, telling them that, yeah, nobody likes doing this, honey, but you still have to do it because if you don't take out the trash, your house starts to stink, you
Right.
know.
If you don't
And
take
the
a
trash and the
shower,
trash
or if you
guy,
don't do,
yeah,
if we don't
yeah,
pay the bills, there'll be no video games.
right. And also explaining to them what bills are. You
Mhm.
know, you would be amazed at how many younger people
Mm.
don't understand that you have to pay for electricity. You have to
Right.
pay for your water because that's not something that they necessarily know or think about.
Mhm.
We've got to have that deliberate conversation of, yeah, you actually pay for those things. Talking about taxes, as weird as that may sound, and explaining what do taxes pay for? And
Mhm.
really kind of breaking all of that down so that they understand those things.
Well, and it apparently, as we were talking about, Angela here says
Uh-huh.
that son thinks it's magic, right?
Uh-huh.
And so, really, many kids do, in particular,
Yeah.
are individuals, or maybe even as we talked about,
Yeah.
individuals who are older, maybe one spouse has always paid the bills.
Right.
Something has happened and it's changed rules. So,
Right.
understanding all of
Right.
those things, going through some of the budget
Yeah. Yeah.
information, and
Yeah.
being able to say this, this is the expenses that we have,
Yeah.
and here they are.
We
And
need
most of
to
the time
we need
it's
to
we don't know we spend that much
yeah.
on that, right?
Yeah. We need to normalize talking about money,
Yes.
because I think in our society, there's this huge taboo about talking about money. And especially with our kids, we need to talk about money because that's how they learn. You know, there are a ton of kids who go off to college
Yes.
who never realized that you have to pay for internet, you know, or any of that because they never had those conversations before, and they just thought it was available to everybody and for free and all of that, and it's not.
And going off to
So,
college is a very good example, or living on your own for the first time,
yeah.
or even with other roommates.
Mhm.
Many times you don't think about because you don't know. So
Right.
maybe even sitting down and saying, this is how much it takes to keep the lights
Right.
on, a house payment,
Right.
lights, heat, these things.
Yep.
So
Yep.
these are the things that we need to look at.
Yep.
I do not see any more questions on my side. Those are all great questions. Jill, do you have any questions on your side?
I have nothing that's been posted to Facebook.
Okay.
We are good. Carly, again, thank you so much for being here today. I
Oh,
really, really do appreciate it. It's as
absolutely.
always, you bring such wonderful information, and it's always so timely. And you know, there's nothing that as parents we just keep supporting each other and just kind of keep ticking along.
Right.
I want to bring up our QR code one more time. And so anyone didn't have the opportunity to look at that earlier, it's up here now. I've also posted it in our chat box. I think it's going to go. Yep, there it went. So please, if you have an opportunity to use that, I guess I took it back down. Um, I am telling you what, this is just a crazy day with this computer. Um,
I have just placed the URL for the Arc of Indiana in the chat.
okay, there we go.
And they're wonderful.
Again, if you would please make sure that you fill out that survey, and you'll be able to get that certificate as well whenever it is, when you're done, you can print it off. Ladies, thank you so very, very much. I appreciate everything that you have done today. It's, again, it's always a pleasure to have you, Carly. We always look so forward to you being here. And again, we always know we have such great information.
Well,
There's
thank
no
you so
other
much for inviting
questions.
me.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime. You know that you can come back here anytime. When can we pencil you in again? um, Ladies and gentlemen, please, and Carly, before I do go, I do
Uh-huh.
want to put a plug in there because you do a
Mhm.
weekly,
Monthly.
monthly.
Uh-huh. We do a monthly webinar called Ask the Arc, and it's on
Yeah.
all sorts of disability related topics. Um, in January, we did one on the waiver changes that went into effect December 31st. In February, we're actually going to have Heather Dane on to talk about self-directed care, which is a brand new option on the family support and CIH waivers, so that people can learn about that. So we've done webinars on work incentives and why they're important, how you document them, and all of that. We've done one on navigating the Social Security process because no one is ever prepared for that. And all of our webinars are recorded and then posted to our YouTube channel as well.
Yeah, so absolutely jump over there at the Arc of Indiana and check out all of their educational things too. It's just a plethora of information that you will absolutely learn so much. If you're watching this on replay, as usual, I do need for you to fill out those surveys, and then you'll be able to do that certificate as well. Okay, I don't have any questions that have popped up on Facebook. I don't see any that's posted in our chat box here. Ladies, thank you so very much for being here with me today. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you to our audience for being here as well. We appreciate all of your support, and we will see you everybody in a couple weeks.
And
Thank you,
Jill,
everyone.
I would remind everybody, February 5th, Carly Lee from Indiana Family to Family will be here to talk about family to family and their resources and their information sheets. So thank you
February
all.
5th.
February 5th. Thank you for joining us for the InSource webinar, and visit our website at insource.org.
And thank you so very much. Everyone have a
Thanks.
wonderful week and be careful.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.